Okay, welcome everybody. We are thrilled to be going live here with composer Andy Akiho, also our good friend. Thanks so much to everyone for tuning in. For those of you who don't know, we were actually planning on doing this stream last week, but we had to move it over to here. Andy got a little bump on his head, but he's feeling better now. And I think we got the OBS live stream thing all worked out, fingers crossed, but everything seems to be working good on our end. So we're really thrilled to welcome composer Andy Akiho here with us this afternoon. Yes, clap, clap. And I will toss it over to Johnny Allen, who's going to get us started here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Vic, and thanks to all of you for tuning in and spending this afternoon with us here. Like Vic mentioned, we are feeling super lucky to get to hang with Andy right now, and he's a good friend. He's a collaborator. He's taken time out of his day to be here. Andy, how are you doing?
Great. How are you guys? Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, no problem, no problem. Yeah, we're glad to have you. We're doing well, hanging in there. It's nice to be able to still communicate from 3,000 miles away. So I guess that's a perk.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, Andy is, for those of you who don't know, he's a tremendous composer. He's also a tremendous performer. He's a steel pan virtuoso, and just to give you a sense of some of the accolades here, he's a winner of the Rome Prize for composition back in 2014. He's also written for such distinguished ensembles as the New York Philharmonic, the Oregon Symphony, National Symphony, Shanghai Symphony, uh, Sandbox Percussion, which is actually what we'll be talking about quite a bit today, is the piece that Andy has written / is writing for us at the moment called Seven Pillars. That's something maybe a bunch of you have heard of already, but in case you haven't, that's a 75-minute evening length work for percussion quartet. And today, we're actually going to spend most of this session kind of sharing that piece with you. It was supposed to happen last week. We were going to premiere it out in California. Obviously, that did not happen. So rather than sit on our hands, we decided to kind of open it up a little bit to people out there. So before we crack into this, I did want to mention uh, we want to hear from you. So this is live for a reason, and that's because we want to get any feedback or any questions that you have about this process as we're chatting about it. We want to say welcome to, of course, all our friends and family, and big welcome to folks who are friends of the Mandavi Center and Mana Contemporary. Both those organizations were a big part of this piece. So yeah, we feel free to chime in the chat box to the right of the window here. But that's enough of me. Andy, I see a steel pan in the background there. Have you been practicing?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Now, I've
Oh,
actually been working on some Bach a little bit this week for fun. Just
Really?
for fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
what Bach?
The only thing I know, the G minor sonata with
Oh,
on the violin sonata number one.
Nice.
That's a really interesting piece. So, Andy, can you talk a little bit about actually learning that piece? I know that that's a piece you spent a long time with, and that it. I mean, I know the answer to this question already, but just to tell everyone that it really influenced a major work of yours, right?
Yeah, it influenced 21, but I'm trying to learn the whole sonata right now just for fun. But
Oh, wow.
the fugue, the second movement in that, the 21st measure is what inspired the all of 21, pretty much. There's three chords in that measure that are block chords, and I just arpeggiated them, and then worked with Marielle on those arpeggiations and mixed a little bit of Steve Rice, like phasing that with triplets, and that became like the core of 21 kind of, or that's what inspired the piece basically.
Yeah, yeah. That's so funny how there's literally just this one measure, like a one, two, 4 bar, 4/8 notes, I think, in that entire
Yeah,
rock piece that spawned the whole 21.
yeah, it's like about 4/8 notes of that one bar. Yeah,
So, okay, well, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here. So before we even talk about about how you found the steel pan, which I know is like your main instrument now, I would just love to hear a little bit about your background as a composer. So I know it was not the first thing that you did when you were growing up. So how did you find percussion to even start with?
Well, that was my sister. I have an older sister, and she kind of raised me a little bit, So she was a rock drummer, like heavy metal, double kick, Tama rock star set, and she played in high school a little bit, and a little bit after high school, and she got me hooked on it.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing I was learning were like Metallica tunes and stuff, and
wow.
Guns N' Roses and that kind of thing.
So you started out as a drum set player, and what about like at what point in your life did you find classical music?
I mean, legitly around when I was 29, but I was in band and all that kind of stuff in high school, and then when I did undergrad, I did orchestra, and I used to play with the South Carolina Philharmonic, stuff like that. I played in like youth symphony when I was in high school, those kind of things. But I didn't really know the music, or I was just like counting and playing on the right beat. I didn't really internalize anything, even though I liked a lot of it. I don't think I could understand a lot of it at the time yet. And I think what really got me into it was coming in backwards through contemporary classical music and then getting into like the Schuberts and all that, but I started, if there was a timeline of music history, I started the other way and went that way.
Nice.
So now I love like Michaud and Leonin and Periton and all that, but that wasn't first, it came from more of the contemporary side first,
Yeah.
At least the love of it, you know what I mean?
Right. And then I know that like when I think about your percussion writing, one of the things that stands out to me is the way that I know that drum corps was a huge part of your upbringing too, and the interesting way that you incorporate the rhythms and even the mindset of rehearsing a drum corps program. How you bring that into the mix. So how did you find drum corps? What kind of what part of your life did you spend doing all of that?
Well, after middle school and all that, I went to high school and I wanted to be in drumline in high school, and I was embarrassingly bad. I could not, mark time or whatever they call it and like try to play in time. You throw a triplet, I was done. Anything that affected my hand and feet coordination was whack. Like I was not supposed to be a drummer. And I just practiced all the time. And I remember I didn't know what drum corps was. And me and my friend Xavier went up to Carolina Crown. They were up in Charlotte at the time, and we were in Columbia, South Carolina. And we went up, and it was like, me and my friend Xavier Ross and Matt Falter, I think. We all went up there. And I remember auditioning. This was like 1994. And it was embarrassing. Like they were literally laughing in my audition. I couldn't blame them because that was just so dumb. Like I didn't know I was like, oh, is a flam tap this? And then after being embarrassed, I mean, this sounds like a cheesy trait, almost like a Charlie Parker type story. After being literally laughed at in my audition, I just got inspired, and me and my friend Xavier practiced hours and hours every day for a year straight. And then I went in, and I was so bad they remembered me next year, and I killed it, like at least in comparison to how I played the year before. And then I started marching Crown back in the early days, did 3 years of that and did 3 years of cadets of Bergen County.
You did 6 summers, okay.
Yeah, and all was on top bass. I really loved playing bass, and I loved splitting all the parts and being like a team with 4 to 5 other dudes.
I think we have.
It was like it was like a camaraderie between, the line.
I think we have a video clip of one of these that we've dug up. I think I think it's a good moment to show that to everybody here. What is this, Andy? This is a Cadets 2000, maybe?
Yeah, I think that would be the
2000.
Yeah.
So Andy's on the
So
top
that
bass.
that would have been my last year, Cadets 2000. So it's my 6th and final summer with drum corps.
Nice. Yeah, well, we have a little clip of that. Should we play it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Let's do it. All right, we're back. Sorry about that tag end there. That's not what we were going to watch. Yeah, it's so cool, Andy. So you were the top bass in that video.
Yeah, the small bass drum.
Cool. That's amazing. Yeah, I'm getting some in the comments. People are saying that with the speaking is a little soft. So I'm trying to do what I can here to fix it, but we'll try and speak up too. So thanks for that.
So Andy, I mean, I think that even just watching that short clip, I can see so much of what you will eventually take and use in your own writing later. But I've heard you talk so much about the intensity of being in drum corps. So I never did drum corps, so I didn't have that experience. But I would love it if you talk a little bit about like the process by which somebody learns a piece like the one that we just heard that clip of, because I think it has so much to do with the way that you write music now, and especially how you rehearse it, how you work on it now.
Well, I've thought a lot about this kind of recently, because it's been back in my mind again. I haven't really thought about chord in 20 years, But I think what I got most out of it, and what I try to bring in, even in classical coaching, is the work ethic and the perseverance and the type of dedication, like while we're doing this. And that's the main thing I got out of core. It's not like a music. I mean, there's a lot of music, there's a lot of musicians, but most people don't go on to be musicians. Like, everybody in my line was, the second bass drummer in there, he's a cellist actually. Another guy was like an engineer in West Virginia. He's a crazy runner too. He was like number 2 in the state for running marathons and shit. And everybody's kind of, they all have different lives, but my point is, is the dedication to something, anything. It doesn't matter if we were doing music or building a house or something. It's just being so working so hard at one thing. And I have noticed in different years, even within the same corps or within different corps, you see that just depending on like the staff and the team and the energy of that year, you can see how much further you can get because of that. It's just like having a great basketball team. Like, you could take Chicago Bulls pre-Jordan, and then you see when Jordan came in and Pippen and, and the right coaches, everything. When all that's lined up, you can create some very magical experiences, and that's the main thing I got out of that. I remember the years that were better and worse, not necessarily competition wise, but just what I learned out of that, and the text that I learned the most from, and I tried to absorb that positive energy. And what helped me grow as a musician, because a lot of that wasn't easy for me. It took a lot, for me. It just didn't come natural to me, a lot of that. So learning from them and me being able to share that with others is important to me, because I remember what 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 helped me grow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's what I try to apply with my music. So that even more than compositionally, or you could say, oh, vertically aligning all these rhythms and all that. Yeah, that's in there a little bit, but it's more the dedication of it. And I think that's why when I decided to become a composer, I took it as serious as I used to take that. Like, it's everything. It's all or nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah. I mean, I think that it's so true. And I know that you and I, we argue about this stuff all the time. Like, I'll sometimes try to convince you that one little piece of a work that we're playing together or something like that isn't important. We should move on to something else. And you're always the one to be like, no, every detail needs to be as good as the last one, and we're not going to take the shortcut through anything. And I think, I mean, I admire you a lot for that. It's not a quick way of doing work, but it results in a really great product at the end of it.
well, I'm usually wrong in our arguments. Yeah. but when when there's a certain section that I feel like super important, it might only be 1% of that particular piece. But once you actually master that one thing, you've actually mastered 80%. I mean, when I'm talking about my music, because I'll just know. I was like, oh, if you can master that 5/4 thing, and the strings can feel that against the quarters, right? Then they're not feeling just that one bar that we spent way too long on. It's helping their core feel the other 80% of the piece. And I think that's important. And it's not just important for my piece or that particular piece of music or measure. They'll have that the rest of their lives. Because that once you really learn something, internalize it, like you learn a new language and you can really think in that, then you have it for the rest of your life, I think.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. Okay, so you're playing drum corps. You've done that for a bunch of years, but then at what point does the steel drum become a big part of your life? Because now that's your main. I mean, you're a percussionist. You play all the instruments, but steel drum is really the thing that you're known for. So how did all that happen?
Um, I think I can't remember if I ever saw one in high school, but I do remember now, only because I looked at pictures recently, that I saw a steel pan in London when I was there with my high school marching band doing the London New Year's Day parade. And I remember seeing a guy on the street, and I was poor back then, but I had like, he was playing for like busking. And I was like, oh man, what is this weird thing? And I remember that, but I didn't know what it was. And I remember giving him my bag of dried banana chips. That's all I remember that experience. I don't even remember what he played. I remember from this one picture, all these, and this is pretty recent, like in the past couple of years I saw it. Besides that, I don't think I ever saw a pan until I got to college. So it wasn't like this major exotic moment.
Right.
It's not a great story, but when I got to the University of South Carolina, I was lucky that they right when I got there was just a lot going on. So, and even bigger than steel pan, the year I got there was they started West African drumming, and I got really into that. We had like the whole ballet, everything, like from like Guinea Senegalese style. So I was playing Junjuns for that. I was playing in concert band. I had to do 1 year drumline. I had to do orchestra, all that stuff, percussion ensemble, and then steel band was another thing. But for some reason, because I just started really learning how to read notes in college, I was trying to read like whole notes on the marimba and doing my scales on the marimba, and then I was just applying that to pan too. And for some reason, I felt more comfortable in that circle of fifths arrangement of the tenor pan, the lead steel pan, and it just started from there. I didn't take it that serious, but working, like with Chris Lee and Jim Hall down in South Carolina, and being in the steel band with all my friends, my good friends down there, it just kept growing on me. And then when I went to North Texas, I went there for a year. It was like 2000, 2001, and my roommates were really into jazz. So I really got the jazz bug and I went crazy with it. And they were like, oh, you gotta start transcribing jazz solos on pan. And that's what really got me learning the instrument was, taking Parker solos or Miles Davis, Sonny Rollins, all that stuff and learning it around the pan. I remember the first solo I learned was Sonny Rollins, uh, St. Thomas, the one, Max Roach, that original. And that was a very typical thing to do. My roommate's like, yo, you should learn this. This is from the Caribbean, and I learned it. And I made sure not to get like a transcription book. I put it in, I think this program was called Peak, and I kept slowing it down because I have the worst ears in the world. And I remember learning it and learning all these cool like chromatic patterns that I never would have thought of. And that really opened me up with pan. And then my goal was to be like a steel pan bebop player. That's why I moved to New York, was to be a jazz steel panist. So that, that's where it kind of grew from there.
Andy,
and so at this point, sorry there.
I was just going to say, we had a question in the comments that was asking how many instruments you play, Andy. And that's so great to hear that pan is sort of one of your, your main instruments. But I think I forget this sometimes, like you're a percussionist, and you play like, you play percussion. I've even seen you play marimba before, 4 mallets on marimba. Yeah. So you are a percussionist and you're trained as a percussionist.
Yeah. I mean, when I went to South Carolina, it was a percussion performance degree. I mean, I had to work really hard. Like I used to spend the night at the school. I'd line up 8 chairs, stay there, practice all night. Because like I said, I couldn't even read yet. I could read any rhythm, but I couldn't read pitches yet.
Right.
And so I worked on that. Did the little. I even did like the orchestral excerpt kind of thing at one point. And
yeah, well, I'm reminded of the. I mean, like you were saying, with marching band teaching you about, and with drum corps teaching about, like, don't do anything halfway, and that's kind of the story of your life here. It's like you didn't just like dabble in steel pan, like you really dug in. I mean, we've got this great video. I can't wait to show it to everybody.
Yeah, so after University of South Carolina, my professor Jim Hall and Chris Lee, who also taught there, they were like, you got to go to Trinidad. So I went immediately after, and I was really inspired by them doing it and everything, and
yeah,
and I went. I got to play with Ray Holman. Under Ray Holman with Starlift Steel Orchestra, and then the next year I got to play with Phase 2 under Bootsy Sharp, and I think that's the video you have. Music in We Blood was a big change in my life too.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's so amazing to hear how all of these different influences have kind of come together to create the music that you write. And like for people who are listening now who do know Andy's music, and for those who don't, and you're about to learn a lot more about it because we're going to play some excerpts here. But it's so unique because it brings together all of these different backgrounds. Trinidad, drumline, classical percussion training. You've really, and like Johnny was saying, like that drumline spirit of really just like total, discipline and like dedication to what you're doing and doing it to like 110%. Like that is definitely apparent in your music, and it's 100% apparent when we work with you. I think that's one of the reasons we're so psyched to work with you, because you bring this energy to not only the music you write, but the way that you rehearse it and the way that you learn it.
So let's play that clip. So this is a whole steel band. So Andy, like roughly how many people are on this stage playing?
128. Yeah. And
if you'll get a sense of it from this video, but there's no way to explain this until you're standing next to it. Like it is louder, it is more intense and more sound than almost anything else I think I've ever heard in my life. It's really, really incredible.
Get ready. Here we go. All right. Wow.
No joke. Do you remember that, Andy?
What's that?
Like being there in that.
Oh yeah.
Like how long were you down there?
The first year was 5 weeks, and then I went again that same year for about 2 weeks, and then I went again the next year for 4 or 5 more weeks. And
Did you have to like apply to be in these bands or audition, or do you just show up down there and what?
yeah, my first year, right when I got off the plane, I met a guy in the neighborhood, walking down the street, and I was like, "Hey, do you know where Ray Holman lives?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, he lives right around the corner." And we went over to Ray Holman's house, and I knocked on his door, and I was like, "Hey, I want to play." and I just and he was probably and he's very open to foreigners coming in too. And I was very lucky that he was the one I got to meet, and he was a mentor of mine after I got there. And he's so nice. He took me right to the pan yard, which was a couple of blocks away, and he introduced me to my good friend Andrell Job, and he happened to be the captain of that band, or one of the captains, or section leaders, or whatever. And he taught me the tune, and by that night I was playing with the group. But it's all by rote, so it's crazy because it's so syncopated. I would learn some licks thinking they were on the downbeat, they were on the 1/16 note over, so it messes with you a little bit when you hear it with the full band, like when you're learning by rote, just in thin air.
Well, talk about that, just so we make sure everyone understands. So that there's no sheet music, there's nothing like that. What is the process? Like, who's the person who teaches everyone how to play all the notes in these arrangements?
Different bands do different things, but generally, the arranger, which is more like a composer. I mean, they take a pop tune, they arrange it so much that it's a new composition. Anyways, like somebody like Ray would teach the section leaders of each. It'd be like teaching the concert master, teaching the principal players of the orchestra, right? And then they would teach the rest of the group throughout the day, and then you come together at night. But everybody's got jobs.
It's like note by note, phrase by phrase, right? It's like a very slow process.
It's actually lightning fast. It's weird because people really learn it. Well, it kind of in a way it's not as efficient if you got a group together that could all read and you read it down. But the playing level and the rhythmic level, because you're teaching like that, is immediately solid. Because it's just like it's literally in your blood, like this piece, music in your blood. But it's I think a lot of people growing up in that culture and feeling those rhythms and learning by rote, you have it. I mean, I remember the next year I went to the yard and was hearing players and they would just be like they were just having a conversation. Yo, play 1987, play that thing. And they would play the whole composition. It'd be like memorizing a movement of a Beethoven symphony and knowing all your part. And even the next year, I think I learned my part from a quadraphonic player because there wasn't a tenor player in the yard that day. And they're not, that'd be like a cellist teaching the violinist their part note for note.
Right. So these are completely different steel drums that have different layouts and different parts. They're different instruments.
Yeah, your quadraphonics are like way different. I mean, they take up 4 pens, and it's it's insane that they taught me about 90% of my part. This guy, it was crazy.
It reminds me a little bit of some of the process of us working together at Avaloc, putting 7 Pillars together. Some of the sketches, I think we started a lot of these movements learning them by rote. You just kind of throwing ideas out there. I know we're going to talk about a lot of that in a little bit. Andy, I just was curious. You mentioned a little bit earlier, you said before I decided to be a composer. When was that? Like, so you're in Trinidad. What happens next? When do you decide I'm going to write classical contemporary music?
Well, I always wanted to create, but I never thought I'd be writing for other people. So even my first year in Trinidad, I wrote a solo called Macarit, which is named after one of the beaches in Trinidad. And I wrote that for myself, like for the solo competition later that year. that and even in my undergrad recital, I wrote this piece called Hypocrisy with hip hop dancers and found sounds. So I had like rice bowls and metal plates and stuff I still write for. But that was, those are like my first pieces. And when I was in high school, I wrote this piece called Fatima Chicken Lick. And it was like a drum corps style duet. And I still, like, I even have that published because it's just fun. Early crappy works out there too. But anyways, so I've been creative but not really composing since I was in high school, but nothing was serious and it was all just for myself. And then when I got to Manhattan school, so I went to New York for a while. Actually, man, we could go on forever on this, but basically, after going to New York, trying to make it as a jazz steel pan player, by the time I was like 25, 26, when I was 26, I went down to DC and became a sushi chef. And during that time, I was just writing solo steel pan pieces, and those became all the color pieces: Aka, Murasaki, Hada Iro. All those pieces were just me coming home at 4 a.m. after doing the shift at my dad's restaurant, sushi, and just playing these pieces down. And I never wrote them down; I just played them, and those became my first compositions. Because then when I went back to school after that, I just started orchestrating them for friends, basically.
Andy, you're like the Dos Equis guy, the most interesting man in the world, or whatever. Because I feel like every
Sushi
time
chef?
I know every time you tell me something, you're like, oh, that was when I was chilling in Texas. Oh, that was when I was in Trinidad. That's when I was at MSM. That's when I was in Carolina. It's like I feel like
London, yeah.
you've really you would just attack something when you're really interested in it.
When I owned 8 bulldogs at the same time.
Yeah.
I have pit bulls. Yeah. I learned a lot from them today. I wrote a piece for them too. But
the piece of yours, I know.
But yeah, no. So it never was like a complete. I don't know. It was kind of fluid. It was just more like bringing life into composing. And then so after I moved back to New York after sushi, I was teaching about 7 classes a day, 5 days a week. And I don't, what do you say? A public school system, like PS 167 over on East Broadway. And then I also taught at a high school in the Bronx. I mean, it's like, man, that Bronx, that's like what they make movies about. It was a pretty intense school, but teaching pans to try to, change things in the school system and all that. So I went to Trinidad that year just to pick up 80 steel pans, shipped up 80 pans, started 2 programs, and was teaching and just arranging pop tunes and stuff. I'd also been arranging for New York Panorama a few years before that, and that's
like a big steel drum thing here in Brooklyn.
Yeah, like what you saw with the Phase 2 thing, but Brooklyn. So Freddie Harris and I arranged for Sesame Flyers, 2004 and 2005. So going back to teaching in the school system, I was doing that, for about not even a year. I was talking to my friend Baljinder Sekhan, who was working on his master's and then eventually his PhD up at Eastman in Rochester. And I was telling him, man, I want to write for other instruments, not just steel pans. He told me I needed to go back to school for that, which is something I knew I wouldn't be able to do because I couldn't afford anything. And then he was like, you got to meet classical musicians. That's the only way you're going to meet them. If you want to write for violinists, how are you going to meet them if they don't know who the hell I am? So he was like, yo, check out this program at MSM. And applications were way already due. We're talking January. I think applications are due December 1. So I met with the director, Patty Munson, of this new program. It was a brand new program at MSM. And I played for it, and I brought my pan, and I'm glad she met with me. And then I kept playing, and I ended up playing for her for like an hour and a half. Just played everything on pan. And then I was like, hey, I want to audition, because they were open to any instrumentation. And I was like, can I audition on pan? And she was like, yeah, for sure. then I got an email from Jeff Malarski saying, "Yo, if you come here, you got to audition for percussion," because the music all had percussion in it. So I had 2 weeks to relearn all the percussion and more, because I didn't learn enough from. And I hadn't played in about 7 years or read music in 7 years. Just practiced like crazy. I was a roadie for Ethos Percussion Group at the time, and they let me use their studio. And I just practiced, called in sick from teaching for 2 weeks, and just practiced 20 hours a day.
I believe
Hands were bleeding, everything. And then I had an awesome audition and got to go to MSM and stuff, scholarship and stuff. So,
but even there, you were a performer in that degree, right?
Performer, yeah. But then I got to meet everybody. So every concert we had, I almost had a new premiere. Like, because I was just writing for all my friends in the program. There was 13 of us in that very first year. And I got to write for them almost every day. I was the only percussionist in the program the first year, so I was playing in everything, because contemporary music and all the percussion stuff. And I was just way out of my league, but I worked really hard. And then I didn't sleep at all back then. And then I would go home every night and write new pieces, new chamber works every single day.
Wow.
That's what started it.
Yeah. And then after that, after you got that degree, that's when I know you started to think more seriously about going to school to learn how to write.
Yeah, after that first year at MSM, I mean, I finished the 2 years, but you're going somewhere else, you got to apply after 1 year. So I'd been working so hard, and I was working with Julia Wolf at the time too, and I worked up a portfolio to send to Yale and stuff, and I'd also done Bang on a Can summer program as a performer, and then the next year as a composer. So it was a lot all within 1 year,
Yeah. Well, Andy, this is amazing. We could talk to you for
Yeah, sorry.
No. It's
I know.
Fine.
I have like a dozen questions, but I know we got to move on.
Well, no, I mean, we're going to move it towards, I think, the reason why a lot of folks are here today, which is to talk about this big piece, 7 pillars that you're writing for Sandbox right now. So how did this piece start? Like, how long ago did the idea for this piece go back?
Yeah, that was like you and Svet, Ian, and yeah, Ayana,
2012 or something.
Gwen and Jihei. Well, all right, so I'm lucky because you guys kind of are you guys are the Van Sice family, and I'm like the adopted kid into that a little bit.
You're that weird cousin that shows up.
I just show up for the cocktails at the family reunions. I just crash it, I'm crashing the barbecue. But no, I was lucky, when we were in school together, you guys are too young, the 3, but Ian and I he's too young too, but I went to school late. Anyways, when we were in school together, they let me use the percussion room sometimes to write. And so when I wrote Lignius, that was like one of, our first collaborations, right? I mean, one of the first ones.
That was the first big piece, yeah.
Yeah, they let us. And Bob Van Sice was a really awesome mentor. Is like more as a coach, like a chamber coach, and so I think I got to know a lot of you guys and the earlier generations, even though I'm probably older than the earlier generations that went through his program, like Svet and those cats, Ayana, so I don't know who started this. Was it Svet? Or was it you, Ian?
Yeah, well, so Svet got that group of people that you were just mentioning. Yeah. They got us together to make this recording of this Paul Lansky piece. I think
Threads.
You were probably studying with Paul at Princeton at the time.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, definitely.
And so we recorded Threads, and we started talking about maybe doing something together. And I'm not sure if any of the other guys knew you, because like you say, they're a little bit older, so you didn't go to school with them. So I started talking to them about you, because you had been telling me, I think, that you were interested in doing a percussion ensemble piece at some point, because weirdly, that was something that you, like, I know you had written some percussion ensemble stuff a little bit at MSM, like a long time ago, but you hadn't really written anything, even though you had so many percussion parts in all of your chamber pieces, and you had some solo pieces, you hadn't written a percussion ensemble piece.
Right, yeah.
So we started talking about trying to do that.
That's right. Yeah. So no, that's yeah. Okay. So yeah, I remember. Of course, I always wanted to write percussion ensemble music too. Um, but no, I actually didn't. I didn't even write anything at MSM. I wrote something for my senior recital in University of South Carolina. But it was more like writing for the dancers and stuff. But yeah, so that was my first piece, I think, right, for percussion quartet or percussion ensemble.
Yeah.
And I'm very fortunate that you guys asked me to do that, because then I was like, okay, now I can write whatever the hell I want. There's no limitations because everybody could play so well, and such great musicians. It's like, oh wow, I could be as music like it, there was, and I don't mind limitations. I like that too. I like to be like, okay, I know what they like, blah blah, and what certain groups, how much time they have to learn it. And, I think logistically too. And with this, it was just like, it was like, oh, I can literally write anything I want. Don't worry about if it's hard or easy or any of that. And not that everything has to be about virtuosity, but it let me open up to any kind of creative endeavors, And so being at Princeton, I had access to certain instruments. They don't have like a performance program there. So it was pretty limited with the instruments, and that's what I wrote for. That's what started that piece. And you guys were called the Time Travelers at the time. I never agree with that name, but it's cool. I get it.
You like the name Sandbox though.
But no, that was cool. And then, writing that piece, I was like, oh, I got super inspired, because like all of a sudden I can write for percussion ensemble, do whatever I want. And immediately I thought of, oh, I want to do 11 movements, 7 featuring all the percussionists, and then, or featuring the full quartet, and then 4 featuring each individual.
Wait, you immediately thought of that?
It's
the first thing that came into your head?
No. As I was writing, that's why it's called Pillar 4 and not Pillar. It was before, when I was writing that, I was improvising. I had a microphone and my PA system, and I had loop pedals, and I would just play one part and go to the next instrument. I was thinking and stuff, and I was like, man, I don't feel like writing a 10-minute piece now. I need to write, I have way too many ideas, and within a couple of weeks, I had enough ideas I think I had 2 hours ideas. This is early 2013. And then I think I talked to you guys, and I was like, man, is there any way one day we could just do a full 11-minute full concert? And it didn't work out for that because, logistics. We all had our own projects. There's anything from deadline to finances to all that. I was already running late on that piece as it is. And I'm talking about writing 10 more. Come on. Sometimes I think too big and I can't follow through. So eventually, with you guys taking over the project years down the line, it was awesome with the premiere with Time Travels and everything. And I think we had a really killer video with that, an awesome performance. I love that premiere where everybody got to stand around us, and it reminded me of Trinidad, that kind of vibe. And then when you guys took this project to do the full thing, it was like, oh man, this is great, because I know you guys really well. We've done a lot together, especially now, and it's just been a lot of fun to be able to do make this whole dream come to life, because I didn't know if I still called it Pillar 4, because maybe in 50 years I'd write the other ones or whatever, but I'm glad it's coming to life now, and I got to look back at these old videos from 2013, all these ideas, and start putting it together and trying to remember what my dream was back in 2013. And over these years, it's been nice to see this evolve with you guys. And now, I'm morphing some things more to your personality as a group and as individuals with the solos too, So it's taken a new life, but it's fun to see what started the seed of this,
Yeah. Well, that's all amazing, and that's a perfect pivot to talking about 7 Pillars, the piece that we're here to talk about. So maybe before we even get into it, we're going to play you guys a short clip. So we're going to play a few clips over the course of the next half an hour or so that we're all talking from different little sections of movements from this piece. Now, keep in mind that these are workshop recordings. A lot of this music Andy was writing like 12 hours before we learned it and taped it.
You mean before you memorized it?
Before we memorized it and then taped it. That's right. So the eventual final version of the piece might look and sound a little bit different, but this will just give you an idea. We actually haven't shown these videos to anyone before, so we're really psyched to get them out there. So Vic, I think we're going to play a little bit of Pillar 1, right, from the beginning of the whole piece, right?
Yeah, Pillar 1. Yeah, so this is the top of the piece, and all of these videos are just short little excerpts as well. It's not the full movements, but we'll play a few of them. Pillar 1 first. Okay, we're back.
Awesome. So those videos are from this workshop period we had at Mana Contemporary in February of 2020.
Yeah.
And that was actually the last of 3 pretty extensive workshops we had with Andy. And so Andy, we've been watching you compose little pieces of this massive work over the last 2 or 3 years now. It's been sort of fascinating to watch how all of this has come together. I can't help but notice that whenever I see you working on a new idea or working on a new thing for a piece or for a movement, that almost always shows up in you just sort of like jamming, totally improvising on the instruments. I remember when we were at Havelock, you were in our rehearsal studio, and you'll just start basically playing something, and you'll grab another instrument. You'll be like, "Hey Vic, get me that bottle. Here, give me those 2 pipes." And then you sort of like are all of a sudden you're improvising on this brand new instrument. I can't help but notice how it seems that improvisation is really essential to your process. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about that. I know you mentioned that you had some interest in the jazz world kind of previously.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, for about 3 years of my life, jazz was everything, and I never got good at it at all. I mean, I think that takes 20 years to even be able to say it's a proper sentence, to be honest. Like when you're doing the real deal, like people you hear about through history, and I think it's just like a total dedication. But for me, I'm really glad I was immersed in it it was just a very concentrated part of my life. And I think that helped my core just think with improvisation, whether it's playing over changes or playing in some kind of set structure, whether it's modal or something or a rhythmic thing. And then, I never got good at this neither, but I think most of my lessons throughout college were on drum set. I would say 60%, whether I was studying with Jim Hall or cats out in North Texas and anything, or most of it was drum set, and I think a lot of that led to the improvisation of me just grabbing things and just feeling that intuitively. So a lot of what we were talking about earlier with 7 Pillars those were the instruments I had at Princeton. So I just lined them up, and that was basically all that there were. So when we go to Havelock, you guys bring a couple more things, like whether it's a bottle or whatever. We get the metal pipes, that kind of stuff. I want to add more to that. And now 7 Pillars has 13? We got like 13 pitched pipes, almost chromatic, right? And that's because we kept having it. I was like, oh, actually, let me grab the A flat too, and I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I just like to work with that stuff, you know, whether we're, and sometimes I'll build, actually, even though this piece has a lot of improvisation of me messing with it, that the core thing about this piece and why I'm calling it pillars and all this, it's got a lot of architecture. So yes, there's improvisation, but it's within the architecture. I mean, that's why Pillar 2 is exactly 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all the math, the nerdy stuff, that it all works out every single note.
Yeah, it's like,
especially in 2 and 6. 4's got a lot of it, and that's what, you know, all the palindrome structures and all that. No stuff nobody cares about, but it helps me create, and I feel like it helps the piece have a stronger backbone. Even if you never care, believe in that stuff, or even want to know it, to listen to it and enjoy it, it's what holds it together for me compositionally, and it inspires the improvisations over that structure.
yeah. I
I
mean,
think that's important.
it's like a Bach fugue or something, you know, but you're just working with like hyper dense rhythms, you know, instead of like polyphony.
Yeah, it's yeah, because I'm not baller like Bach. I got polyphony, but I feel the rhythms over the, you know, these underground structures, and I try not to make it so obvious. Like, it's, you know, it's more, you know, these numbers and stuff.
It reminds me of,
sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
well, there's a question that kind of it popped up in the chat from Jeff, that reminds me of this. Like, the way Bach writes for pitches is kind of like how you write for rhythms. And Jeff asked about your like deceptive way of writing rhythms and meters, where the audience will think they're feeling the pulse here, and then you'll throw this other thing on top of it or underneath it that completely changes that. And is that, do you do it because it's fun, or is it part of a transition, or do you consider that the focal point? Like, what's your approach with that stuff?
I mean, that kind of stuff, I do it because that's what I want to hear. I just write what I would want to hear if somebody else wrote it. And it's just the truth. I want to write music that I want to listen to personally. So, and I like when other people want to hear it too. And I'm, you know, whether it's my mom or whether it's a professor or something, it doesn't matter. But I want to be able to share this with anybody, you know, not the word accessible is a little not the right word, but you know what I mean? Because a lot of people say that, oh, your stuff's so accessible or whatever. But it's really, I just want to share this, whether it can be out or, because sometimes I'll go way out harmonically, but I feel like, you know, there's these parameters of music, right? You got rhythm. I think that's like that's the ground, that's the roots. You know, you got harmony, you've got melody, you've got timbre. And I think if you go way back, I feel like rhythm is like the root. And that's so important to me. And obviously harmony, melody, all that's really important. And timbre is really important to me too. I think that's a lot of personality comes out in those two parameters to me, just intuitively, or I feel like I can communicate easier with those.
Right.
And I will spend a lot of time on harmony and melody because I love melody. But with this piece, I've set up these this architecture, little scales that might go 60 or 70 notes or whatever, but I'm feeling the harmonies based on that. I'm not thinking, oh, this is an A flat major 7, flat 9, whatever, you know, like I'm not thinking of all that. I could, but I feel like that might limit me to start thinking very like this. And I like to think more Renaissance, I guess that's the right word, where it's more
Voice leading.
Yeah, it's just it's more about the line and the counterpoint, the harmonic counterpoint will happen as a result of that. I'm just mainly just trying to use my ears, intuition, improvisation over these structures, and not be so rigid about it, because it's still life, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you talk about that. It feels like that rhythm as a priority is something that I think the 5 of us really have in common. I think when we all listen to music, you know, we hear certain things that are pleasing to us, and a lot of times with the 4 of us, those are rhythmic things that are sort of fascinating. I wanted to just talk a little bit about the time we spent at Avaloq in 2018 and 2019. The five of us spent a bunch of time up there in New Hampshire, and I think that that time together is pretty essential to having made this piece come together. I think that those early development stages were really key for the four of us, and I think they were, for us all kind of coming together on this piece. I wonder if we could just talk a little bit about what that process was like for you. I think what was it, like 6 weeks, 7 weeks together at Avaloq over 2 years?
Yeah, I think over the 2 years, definitely.
And you,
Probably like 7 or 8 weeks. Yeah.
it was kind of your idea. You're like, it's got to be at least a month, like right off the bat. And we're like, awesome, like let's do it. That we didn't expect that.
It takes me a minute to get in the groove. Even if I wake up in the morning, it's gonna take me hours before I can really start. So you do that on a macro level. Our first week we're getting stuff done, but by week 2 or 3, shit's really happening. And I feel like I don't know. It takes me a minute. I'm not as good. I mean, if I have to come in like we did Mana, we did that in a week, and we got a lot done in a week. But I like to, I didn't know you guys as well as I knew Ian before that, right?
Right.
That's so important to me, is to really know the performer. I mean, I can do it without knowing the performer, but if I know what you guys like and what challenges you and what you want to grow with and what I want to grow learning, it's a better process, and we all grow from that. So it's not just like, it's not just like a day job or we're painting a wall. Like we're making serious art here.
Yeah, I mean, that I'm remembering back to the first week at Avaloq. I feel like a lot of that time was us hanging out, playing some ideas back and forth, but I feel like we were listening to a lot of music, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And not a lot of like you said, painting a wall. It was a little more fluid than that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I love to paint. Painted this wall, but like painting some kind of art picture. If you wanted to the analogy to the art world or to the visual world, like I think very visually. So, yeah, to me, it was great. Even though you guys had already learned Pillar 4, but I think we even grew from there, and then that inspired the other movements, and even the stuff I thought about as far back from 2013. It definitely changed how that came out, because it's more catered to you guys and to our experiences now.
That's so cool to hear, because I mean, we're psyched about this piece because we love your music, but we're also really excited that it feels very special to us because you know us so well now and you know our playing so well. It feels like it's really written for us individually and for our quartet. I'm playing a little reel right now from Avaloq, so people are getting to see a little bit of when we worked with you. But it's been a very kind of hands-on sort of process.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's more organic. It's more tailor-made.
Yeah.
I like to write like that more. It brings it more to my roots, and playing with rock bands as a kid, those kind of things. It's a little more organic like that, I think. And I think when people hear it, they feel that too, because then it's like, oh, they're not just doing this to do this. It's like it's an experience.
Mm-hmm.
So we got another question in the chat that I would love to hear you talk a little bit about your background with math and your writing. So much of, especially of the 7 pillars, you can divide the phrases and the notes and the rhythms that you're writing into patterns of numbers or math, or however you want to talk about it. So what is your background in this? Like, how do you come up with these patterns? How do you find these patterns? Why is that something that seems to really be attractive to you?
I've never thought about this really, but I feel like, like math and science are a pretty universal language, just like music is. And, back in the way back days, like music was one of the 4 subjects or whatever, however it was back in antiquity. Like these were all at least as important as each other. And I think they still are. We just, maybe sometimes the academic systems are a little skewed. They're a little messed up a little. But anyways, I feel like these are true. This is everybody knows this. They're truly universal languages, and I feel like, to me, just naturally putting these together without being too heady about it, just doing it naturally. I think that's what I was talking about earlier. I feel like it can build a foundation in something. It can make that root system stronger. And then that way, if there's improvisatory musical ideas over that, you've got the root system to hold it up. I'm all into astrophysics and the universe and all that stuff too. And I like thinking in macro and micro. Like maybe we could look as far deeper into quarks and tiny little subatomic particles. We can look out past the 13.8 billion year universe. You know what I mean? That's getting all like, a little cheesy with that sound, but it's true. Like I feel like musically, I want to do that on some kind of architectural level, and I love architecture too.
Yeah, man, I feel like, a student could look at Pillar 4 and analyze that piece for weeks. Every time we talk about it, we discover another number pattern and another palindrome in that piece. At one point you showed us your graphs or your charts for some of these movements, and they look like fractal drawings or something. It's sort of incredible. I think hearing you talk about this, like we always, when we're talking about your music, we're always saying that you use rhythm expressively, that you're a composer who's instead of harmony, you're taking rhythm, and that's the sort of the means of expression, or the sort of the thing that's pulling the listener through the piece. So you're creating tension with rhythm, and you're playing games with rhythm, as opposed to like harmonic games and harmonic tension. That's sort of or at least that's what I'm thinking about when you're talking about it here.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Yeah.
And with the idea of structure, like I also remember you refused to write any other notes for the rest of Seven Pillars until you had a good concept for the 75-minute structure and the way it would be interlaced with these solos and with the quartets. And we spent that first week of Avaloq like writing up possible macro structures, and it made perfect sense. It's like, why should you start writing a book if you don't know what the whole thing is about yet,
Well,
Yeah. Go ahead, Andy. Sorry.
I think you could take it both ways. I just happen to want to do that with this piece because I've never thought about a full piece. But sometimes I just go and just run. And yeah, I think you could do that if you're writing a novel too. You could just start on page 1, just start the story and maybe not know where you're going. And it's more like a dream, right? And I write like that too. I enjoy writing like that too. And a lot of my stuff is that. But with this piece, I was really thinking of that architecture. I think I was also inspired, I was meeting a lot of architects in Rome at that time too, when I first wrote Pillar 4, and I was obsessed with the Pantheon. And I would go there every single day, like almost there. I would walk there, ride a bike there almost every day, and just be in awe by, that kind of stuff, and just all the architecture and everybody in Rome and stuff. I think that played a lot about me wanting to think of this particular piece so strong with architecture.
So I think I'd love to play another clip, but so one thing that we've kind of mentioned but haven't really talked about is the fact that this piece, this evening length piece, contains both quartets and solo pieces. Could you talk for a quick second about that decision, like how you came up with that, why you wanted to do that, and why it was important for the whole structure of the 75-minute piece to have those two different instrumentations happening?
Like as in personnel, quartet versus solo?
Well, no, just like in Seven Pillars, why the choice to include? So Seven Pillars has 7 quartet movements. Those are the 7 pillars. And it also has 4 solos, 1 solo for each member of the quartet that kind of flow through the quartets at different times.
Yeah, I just wanted to feature each one of you, and then a lot of the material that comes from the solo, or it's introducing a new instrument, becomes what is introduced for the next quartet. So you're building this large structure, kind of instrumental and timbre wise. So we're introducing new timbres. Pillar 1, there's no melodic material; it's all drumming. That's the root system, right? And then And then we've got Johnny's solo. So we're introducing the vibraphone. We're introducing metallic timbres, but metallic and melodic harmonic timbres, right? And then pillar 2 uses that. And pillar 3, we're adding, what were we adding? Like pipes and other sounds, but we're also adding different techniques, whether it's bowing or new techniques with the, and then we start combining these, and then, what is it?
Glockenspiel.
And then Terry's solo is the Glockenspiel, right? And then we're adding that whole new element. We're still in the metallic side. We've got the drums and metals and a little bit of the wood from that. And then by pillar 4, that's why that structure is set up. We've got the vibes and the pipes and the Glock and the percussion. And then Ian's solo is following pillar 4. That's going to introduce a whole new harmonics area too, and the warmth and the body of the wood and marimba, right? And then so by pillar 5, we're adding all that together, and we just keep adding. Pillar 6, we've got it all, and we're just going new places. And then pillar 7's like a I don't know, the finale,
Panorama?
the conclusion. Yeah, it's like everything combined, But also pillar 4 is right in the middle of the whole thing, and it's a palindrome on either side of that.
Right.
Time-wise and structure of, the solos versus pillars.
Like where they're placed throughout the piece. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, should we hear the first solo, the vibraphone solo?
Yeah, this is featuring Johnny.
That's right. Yeah, so this comes right after pillar 1.
Cool.
Okay, we're back. Oh, surprise. There are
Michael.
6 of us now.
Who's that?
All right, everyone. So this is Michael McQuilkin. He spent a week with us at Mana Contemporary in New Jersey in February. We were talking about that a little bit earlier. And he has worked with us on the lighting design for 7 Pillars, which you've seen a bit in these videos, and also the choreography. So the video that we were just showing was the one when the vibraphone's kind of doing the spinning spiral. Ian and I are spinning Johnny around in a circle. So Michael has brought an incredible look and has built an incredible arc for this piece with movement and with lighting. So we are incredibly psyched to have Michael here with us. Thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. It's so good to see y'all. I love this piece. Good to see you too, my friend.
So yeah, Michael, maybe
Go ahead.
you can talk a little bit about, so I feel like you kind of adopted or kind of created your approach to the piece in a really, a conducive way. It feels like it mirrors what Andy does as well, like this kind of additive approach with the lighting. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think I'd love to talk about that. I'd also love to talk about just the kind of limitation of what we decided as a collective in terms of how the lighting works, because I think it's important to know that we decided we would try to do something that y'all were completely controlling from from within the performance, and then memorizing all the lighting cues within the score. So there was this kind of strange limitation that we immediately set on it before we ever saw what anything looked like. And the thing that I kind of recommended, we talked about various options. Was it going to be video? And like the idea was that y'all had to take this with you wherever you went. And so I recommended this 8-light kit that has its own road case that you could easily take with you. And this particular company makes a pretty decent app that you can use to trigger all the cues. And so anyway, starting with that, I think was weirdly where we started. Just what can we do with that? And so what I also wanted to make sure we did when we were talking together was not make it about flashing lights right away, and have the original looks be pretty simple, so that we're really focusing on the music and on your talent as players. So we really kind of very slowly decided to introduce new colors, new gestures, and the choreography is really simple. Everything is very additive is the right word, I think, yes, but it's also really gradual, so that like nothing is hopefully distracting from the music, and we're getting used to all of the things that we're going to show you lighting and movement wise slow enough that it never pulls attention, hopefully.
Yeah, that's so cool. We actually got a question here in the chat that was asking, what's the significance of the vibes kind of spinning in a circle? I think it's a cool question, and also maybe kind of goes along with, what's the significance of just movement in general, and I think there's so much of I'm remembering when we worked with you at Mana, you spent, I think you gave up after a while, but you spent a lot of time telling us that we should like stand up straight, pull our shoulder blades back, and think about our posture, and how we're
that's
looking.
That's like drumline, yeah. That's
yeah,
like the drumline melody y'all were talking about earlier. But honestly, it's more sonic than anything. You cannot hear it at all in the recording. It's just impossible. But when the vibraphone is spinning, it's like this massive human Leslie. Like the way that it spits the sound around the room completely changes. And because that piece has this very like dreamy wave like sort of cycle, this non-square, you would have better words for it, y'all, but the way that the melody cycles is more like organic. So using whatever organic shape of whatever room, well, it's not organic, whatever shape of whatever room y'all are in, as part of the experience was the motivation. And then just sort of trying to make it look neat, like as in tidy, not like neat.
Yeah.
But so again, it doesn't feel like we're asking the audience to consider the movement as much as the music and the playing. So I mean, it's hard to get a sense of it in the video, or impossible even. But especially that giant room they gave us at Mana has pretty decent acoustics, and it just like suddenly you're like dizzy and swimming.
Yeah, totally. Well, we have another clip here that we can play. This is actually of Pillar 3, which comes after Pillar 2, but we don't have an excerpt of Pillar 2. We'll show a little bit of Pillar 3, and this is a cool excerpt because I think it shows a little bit more of, in a similar way that Pillar 1 did, kind of a big shot of the whole stage and what the lights kind of look like in the ensemble.
And you'll see how, like, in each movement, there's like a different color palette that sort of runs through the movement. And so we started off with the sort of warmer, or sorry, actually the cooler and slightly darker, more muted colors that we saw in the very beginning and in the Vibe solo. And then it gets a little warmer now in Pillar 3.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. All right, we're back. Man, who knew a groove in 13 could be so funky? So that's cool. I love seeing that little clip because it really shows how much the lights kind of adds to it. And and Ian, like you were saying, the color palette really changing from movement to movement really changes like the feeling of the music. Did we talk at all about how the setup completely kind of shifted when we were at Mana?
No,
Not
not,
yet.
not yet. That was like the very first thing we did, right?
Right, yeah. Well, Andy, you can probably talk a little bit more about this. But
Well, I wasn't in the room, and I'm glad. I think it worked out great. It's so funny. I was like so rigid, like, oh, it's got to be this V, and we're gonna build this thing. And even in the score of Pillar 4, it's got the setup set up. There's a picture exactly where everybody's standing, where everybody's gonna be. You guys threw that out in like the first 5 seconds.
No, we actually tried to keep
awesome.
it.
Oh,
We tried to
really?
keep
Okay.
it. Oh yeah, for a long time, and then but the problem is we kept on having to look at people's backs and stuff.
right.
Yeah.
So it was more about staging, and then we're like, well, let's just try something. We'll show Andy and see if he likes it. And then you came and you're like, oh, this is so much better.
Yeah, it's night and day. Like I don't even recommend ever going back to the way it's set up in the score. I've gotta like black that out in the score now, and we just do the way Michael's getting it set up, and I think that's going to be really. It's amazing how we're able to use the entire stage now, and it's a better experience for the audience visually, like significantly better. I think it makes the music stronger.
I mean, it was a fun experience. It was a fun experience for us because, I mean, Andy, you had come up with this setup that you thought the piece should be in, and so we just kind of we took that because it was your idea and you're the composer. But then when we got to Mana, having Michael there, who was coming at everything from a visual viewpoint, just really thinking about the audience's experience, seeing us as we're playing, and sort of encouraging us to expand the way that we thought about this performance. And so when he started talking to us about that, it made a lot of sense. All the reasons why we couldn't keep the setup the way that you had it made a lot of sense. And then we basically tried every other version of the setup that we could imagine. Like we spent a few hours just moving each instrument to like different corners of the room until we finally found a version that had the least amount of people's like butts facing the audience, even though there's still a little bit of that. I don't think it was avoidable, but the least amount of it. And still allowed us to accomplish the additive process that we talked about, sort of bringing in new instruments as the movements went. But for us, like this is not something that we ever really think about when we're putting together a piece. And so I think for me, that's what made this week at Mana Contemporary really, really special.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Thanks, Michael. It's pretty genius how you guys did this.
Oh, yeah. Well, I really felt like it was a really good collective conversation. Like we experimented a lot. We'd all like stand together, like looking at the shape of the stage and kind of going, maybe if that was an inch that way. We made tiny adjustments, and then at a certain point, it suddenly felt like kind of sculptural. And then of course adding in those pillar lights, the space needed for light to travel around everything became evident, which was unclear before. So the tight structure that you had recommended also was, in a sense, a little more difficult to light because it created so much shadow on the players, because it was kind of like this, the tight pack of mass.
Yeah.
So anyway, and it was also really fun for me because I'd never used these lights before in this way, where y'all were moving them around and triggering them. And so, for me, it was like being a kid in a candy store too, because like I had no idea what anything was going to be. So it was like discovering with everybody. And then, I don't know, it felt like living up to the name Sandbox Percussion. We were all playing like
we were
little kids. Yeah.
And you're a percussionist, Michael, right?
Not at the level y'all are at, but yes, I definitely play me some drums.
Nice.
6 drummers in the room.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. Michael, I wanted to ask a little bit. I was curious if we could just dig in a little bit on the process of how you came up with the looks for each of these movements. I know I remember a lot of the music was fresh in that moment. Some of it was, and so I know the process for you sometimes was, you know, really quickly hearing a piece and trying to kind of make decisions on top of that. I wanted to like see if we could talk about that process a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was kind of hilarious, but really fun also, in the sense that we just, it was funny because we talked about getting this particular kit of lights that would be road friendly, and then became, since we had made that decision sometime around Avaloq, was then this intense struggle to find a company that could actually get the lights to us in time for Mana. And Ian took that on. And then Ian finally found a place that would have them in stock for us to pick up the first day of Mana. But we didn't have our hands on the lighting or the app, or, you know, I looked at online tutorials and stuff, but we couldn't actually play with any of it until we were there. So what I did first was I just built a ton of looks just to like learn the interface. And then to my surprise, a lot of them just didn't match the music at all. So then it was this process of like, y'all were playing and practicing something that Andy had taught you 15 minutes ago. And I would be like, maybe this is green and green looks terrible. Maybe this is teal. No, teal's bad. Because we had theorized like, oh, first one will be mostly white light, a little bit of blue light, which is what we did. Mm-hmm. And that sort of worked because white light just kind of feels neutral. It felt like a good place to start. And then we were like, oh, well, the next piece is whatever, orange, or the next piece is red. And then we would try it and it would be so wrong. And so then it became just like trying different colors and finding a palette. And then once we like felt the vibe of the color felt good with the vibe of that particular piece, I would then program movement and stuff, and then again it would be totally wrong and really awful and distracting, and then back it up and redo it. So it was just kind of like y'all would play, I would just try to blind you and then eventually it would sort of start to settle in a language kind of slowly revealed itself. And probably by the fourth piece we were like, okay, this kind of like chasey, flashy business is cool sometimes, but not too much. And this effect is terrible. I never want to see it again. And this is whatever, like, you know, whatever. The vibe started to present itself, and then came the process of finding out how to put the iPad inside of the performance in a way that you could pass it non-distractingly and all trigger it. And every one of you had a moment of utter frustration with the unreliability of a finger touching an iPad. Much less reliable than, say, a drumstick hitting anything.
Right.
Yeah. Takes practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a frustrating part of the process, but it also, like, I don't think we ever wavered in our belief of how necessary that part of it was to make this happen. Like, one of the first things that we talked about was that if we wanted to have a lighting designer, someone who was cueing the lights, someone else cueing the lights during the performance, we would be limited in a lot of ways. It would cost more to bring someone else on the road with us. We'd have to teach them the sort of rhythmic precision of what we were trying to do. And Michael had this idea. He was like, what if you guys just do it yourselves? I mean, you know the music better than anyone. If you can figure out how to press the iPad screen in the right place at the right time, you speak a language with each other, hit it on the second 16th note of this bar or whatever it is. And it really opened up all these possibilities for us in terms of syncing up the lights with what we're playing, even though I think there were many instances of throwing sticks across the room when the lights didn't do what we wanted.
Yeah. Ian, I wonder if this is a good moment to look at Pillar 4, because that was a piece that did exist before in many performances for us, and now we have this sort of brand new version where we are making some really small musical changes in order to accomplish those lighting requirements. I feel like this is a good moment to show some of that pick.
Yeah, totally. And there's the part in the beginning of this video, if you keep your eye on Terry, you can see him actually, he's got one hand on the iPad and one hand on the glockenspiel. So he's doing all of the light cues in Pillar 4.
I was just going to say that I remember looking forward during the week at Matta Contemporary for Pillar 4. Like we started at Pillar 1, which was music that we didn't know at all. And so I was really looking forward to Pillar 4 because it's the piece that Sandbox has played so many times. By the time we got to it at the end of our week, actually, I think it was the worst thing that we played, like when we just ran through it once, because we hadn't practiced it or rehearsed it or thought about it in months. And it was terrible. I think even Andy like walked in and he was like, oh, what's going on with you guys there? But I think we practiced it a little bit so that this video hopefully is all right.
Here we go, Pillar 4. Okay, we're back. So that's cool to see Pillar 4 like that with those lights. Michael, I remember we were talking a little bit about when we were creating the lighting for Pillar 4, you really felt like that kind of neutral white light really worked for that, kind of like structurally it being like right in the middle, like this main pillar. That being like kind of a bright white light kind of worked in that case.
Yeah, I mean the white light is the brightest those lights can be, so it functionally revealed the most of the stage. So sometimes it'd be really nice to go into a more saturate light when it was just a solo or something, because you didn't have to see very far. You only had to see one instrument in one person's hands. In this case, the performance was very wide, and one thing I kept feeling as we were working on the piece was like, it's annoying if you want to see more than you can see because we're only lighting it with I mean, I guess we kind of just skipped over the fact that I suppose a normal methodology would be to go to a space and use something of their installed light plot, their rep light plot, to augment the show or something. And then we were like, let's just see if we can completely bypass anything beyond what y'all are creating on stage, just to see if it works. Because, you know, like so many things we said, like, well, we'll try you guys triggering everything, and if it doesn't work, then we can talk about the added expense of bringing a lighting tech on the road. You know, we'll start with what we can do right now with who is here. And we were like, well, let's just start with this sort of stuff. Anyway, I digress. I realized that in that piece, there's a lot of detail and a lot of space, and the white light just immediately felt really good because we could see everything. It felt really bright, and it felt like after going through the sort of dreamy sleepiness of the saturate colors before it, we were finally awake again, and it just felt right. I don't think we ever tried any other color, did we? Maybe we did. I just was like, I think the first time we played it, we just put on white light that didn't do anything, and we were like, that's pretty dope. We
yeah, it's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, and then we added 80 cues or whatever.
Right.
There was a version of it that had no cues, and I think in the moment it was pretty late at night, and I think all four of us were like, I like this.
I like that part.
Little by little.
Yeah. And then we tried one cue at one part, and then there was 80 cues. It's like either you're doing a cue with every new musical idea, or you're not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no in between. So, yeah.
When I watch this video, I see my horrible facial hair, and am reminded that, like, I'm like, why the heck didn't I shave for these videos? And I'm like, I remember that during that week, the last thing on my mind was like trying to look good or smell good, or like we were so consumed by the task at hand. And I actually wanted to kind of ask you guys about that a little bit, because Andy and Michael, you've both worked together, and it seems like you're both pretty down for this approach of like, I don't care what it takes. I don't care if I don't eat any meals today, or if I don't sleep tonight, or, you know, whatever has to get done to make this thing happen. And I wonder, have you always been that way, or is that something you feed off of with each other?
Yeah, you talk first.
I tend to put people into those situations, even if they want to be or not. Yeah, I mean, we went into this thing with some music, but not all of it at all. So I think a lot of that is, you know, it might make it a little intense for that week, but I feel like it makes a better product too. Because then we had this intense time of working these ideas out, and then we still had time, so we can both go home after the week and polish it, you know. But I think it needs a little bit of that energy of this being brand new musically. And I'm not trying to make excuse for it being later than it should, but I think there's a little bit of that inspires some things that wouldn't have happened, you know. And you can do that because it's just 6 of us. It's not like a full orchestra or something. You know, we can get away with that more organic experience with this, and that's why we do that's why it's great that we had that opportunity right before. We can't do that now. You know, this happened right before that, so I think it was very positive and very productive.
Yeah, I really loved it. I was luckily we were all living nearby. I actually happened to live 5 minutes away from Mana, so it was really easy for me to commit to it. But the thing I wanted to say, working with y'all at that level, was really a breath of fresh air, because I tell you, those kinds of demands upon your company in, like, say, an opera situation, like that, it doesn't exist. You know, singers must sleep and rest their voice. It's just functionally necessary. Or same with a play, or, you know, you just can't work that way. But something about, I don't know, the rigor of percussion, maybe as it relates to drumline, or something about the militaristic discipline required to learn this particular craft, or I don't know what it is, or if y'all just felt strong-armed into agreeing with the no sleep agreement. But the reason Andy and I work together so much, because I've worked with y'all in Sandbox a few times, and I really hope to do a lot more. I really loved this process. But Andy and I have worked together a bunch, and I think where we really line up is, some people have their work and their life, and Andy and I don't. Like, the thing that our life is the opportunity to get to make stuff. That's what makes life worth living, and that's why Andy doesn't sleep. I think I sleep more than you, but it's not like, oh, I gotta stop working so I can go do my life. There's no difference. So, like, we just want to be there, and we want to make it as awesome as possible. And that's probably why we keep working together, yet we repel so many other people we try to work with. That's not true. That's not true.
Well, that's a great answer.
Well, we have one more clip that we want to play of Pillar 5, but before we do, we got this really nice question that I want to ask both of you guys about how, as the tech and the percussion fields expand, do you see lighting cues and electronics or backing tracks, other elements becoming an integral part of performance in the future?
Oh God, can I answer that? Because yes, I mean, to an extent that I wish I had time to explain how I feel about this. Like, my sense is, well, I don't even know how to sort of start chipping away at that iceberg, but yes. And I think that what's so exciting about this is it's an example of a very new technology, specifically an app-controlled lighting system that is available to people who haven't spent their entire lives learning how to, like, program Max MSP, or, you know what I mean? Normally you would need a much more technical expert to be present to even make such a thing possible. And we didn't even mention that sometimes we use cues that are built into these lights that are audio reactive cues that are just built into the lights. So I don't believe they actually know how to follow Andy's music, but I think if it was like, they'd probably be pretty synced up. But in any case, they're doing something that is in some way unique every performance based on the acoustics of the space. But now we're coming, there's more and more ways to like network cell phones to do a multicam shoot with your cell phones. There's more and more opportunities to do things like this where percussionists on stage are triggering live their own lighting, and the list goes on. I mean, it's too big to start rattling off. The opportunities for artists to engage with technology are just growing rapidly. So I think what we talked about at the beginning of this piece was, do we incorporate video projections, which at this point is sort of like something that you see so frequently that it's almost not interesting. And in order to do it well, it's so expensive because what you're always dealing with projection is latency, that the moment something happens, you hear it a second later. And with percussion music, that's awful. It's like infuriating. Like you wouldn't hear a single note played because you would just be so distracted by the latency.
Right.
So rather than trying to spend literally 10 grand to have a system available that would just maybe start to have low latency, we decided to spend a lot less on something like this. And I was really excited by it because it felt like a new way to engage musicians in a technical way that was musical. Anyway, I should shut up. But yes, the answer is yes.
That's a great answer. I remember when we got to each new movement at Mana Contemporary, it was kind of like, okay, so who's free to cue the lights in this one? And like all four of us were kind of like, just because it's like, it's like literally adding a whole nother instrument to your setup, and to the music, Sorry, Andy, I knew you had more to say.
Rewarding. Yeah, Andy, I'd be curious to get your take on it as well, because I know you have such an you mentioned it earlier, this visual demand for your performances. Like, how do you see that?
I mean, that's why I love working with Michael, because he's always going to bring something new and interesting. We're not recreating the same process every time. Like I didn't know I was going to have these lights when we talked about this, and I think that's what's important. I think just speaking more generally about that question is you use whatever technology you have at that time, and everybody can be creative with whatever they have, whether they are learning Max MSP, which I never learned any of that really, or you're learning how to develop film in a dark room versus you're learning how to manipulate digital photography, and finding ways to be creative within whatever parameters you have. So when Michael limited the parameters of these 7 to 8 pillar lights, it limiting creates more creativity, because then you're like, okay, what can I do within these things, within these parameters, and having whatever technology is available that works with logistics, whether it's funding or the amount of time or stagehands, any of that, just being as creative as possible with what you have. And that's why you always hear these amazing stories of like, man, that film was created for $6 million, which is a lot, but so little for a film. And then you're like, oh, it made 200 million. Like those kind of things, because it had such an impact. But it's more about the minds of what we have to work with and what we can create with that. And
right.
And it's good on all levels, whether it's the lowest budget, the highest budget, the resources, not even just money, but resources.
Yeah, it makes me think like back in 2017 or 18, like we had no idea what the visual was going to be for this piece. But I remember, Andy, you just said like, well, it's going to be Michael and he's going to do something. We don't know what it's going to be, but it's got to be Michael. And like, that was all we knew. Like it was projection, it was lighting, it was something, but it was going to be Michael. That was like, I feel like that was pretty early in the process. I feel like this is a good moment. We have one last clip. I feel this is the Pillar 5.
Oh, cool.
So so this is right after
Ian solo.
Right after
Ian solo. This would be after
marimba is in the
pretty
mix.
chill marimba solo. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And pretty new look compared to Pillar 4.
Oh yeah. No more neutral lighting in this one. All right, here we go. This is pillar 5. Okay, we're back. We're all behind the scenes here, just like jamming out. That one's really fun.
Love that one.
Okay, so
I had a little minute trying to stop the YouTube conversation. Yeah, clearly we didn't shy away from the strobes by this point of the performance.
Yeah, we're melting faces in this one.
Yeah. And there is some audio reactivity happening too at this point in some of those cues, but you can't really tell. It's a bummer that on any recorded medium you can't see the actual depth of what the lights are doing, because you can sort of see that there's like something happening, but there's actually like these 3 color nodes that are traveling through them in the green section, and they're like this weird pink against green. Anyway, it's like Christmas on something strong.
This means they'll have to come out to see a live performance once we're allowed to give live performances again.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and we were learning the music that week. Andy was writing the music that week. You were learning how to program these lights, and so by this point, this was near the end of the week that you were lighting this one, and you were getting deep into the program there. You're trying to explain to us how to do it, and you're like, okay, now you click this tab inside of this tab inside of this tab. He's like, and then it looks like a lightsaber.
that was that was the fun part. We skipped. Did we show any of Ian's solo? No, because you were actually playing a stand-in piece that was So the look for Ian's solo is literally a red lightsabers. The whole stage is covered in red lightsabers, like Kylo Ren lightsabers, and it was a complete accident what it actually looks like if you are standing away from it in real life. Is they look like hot red
Embers.
Yeah, like embers or whatever, the elements of a stove or something. And I found this way to make this really subtle, strange, weird effect that made it look like heat waves. And because red light is so low frequency and your eyes kind of don't know what's going on, it looks like there's heat waves over the entire stage just because of the suggestion of the heat waves over the lighting sources. And it looks like you're all like roasting on coals. Anyway, we took it to like subtler, more dangerous places by that point in the process.
So inspiring to play with that happening around us. It affects the way we play, I think, to have that visual ambiance. It's hard to go back to playing normal concerts after that.
It was fun to watch y'all try to like the first couple of runs with like strobes in your eyes.
It's rough.
You weren't super stoked at that point. I'm glad you're stoked now.
We are. Maybe at some point we'll release the outtakes from that recording.
It's just Johnny at the top of his lungs. That's the outtakes.
Yeah.
Well, look, I think we've kept you guys here for a while. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We do want to thank a few people. This is a project that we've been trying to put together for years, and there have been a lot of different people and groups that have come together to help make it possible. So all of the patrons of Sandbox who have supported us in this quest, we raised a lot of money to commission Andy to work with Michael to buy these lights, to make all this thing happen, and we really appreciate it. The support that we got from Chamber Music America and the Barlow Endowment to commission Andy to write this piece. Thank you so much. The places that we went to build this piece. So Avaloq Farm, Fred and Deb and everyone at Avaloq for hosting us for so many weeks, for putting up with us and our terrible schedule. And the folks at Mana Contemporary for helping us build the visual aspect of this piece. Thank you so much. Also a special shout out to Calvin Swaim, who made these beautiful little teaser trailers that you guys might have seen on social media of Seven Pillars. If you haven't seen them, please go to our page and check it out. And especially thanks to Michael and Andy for both being amazing creative geniuses and for spending this time with us today. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you all.
Thank
It's
you,
a
guys.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, guys, so much for being here.
Yeah. Thanks. It's been real. It's been a lot of fun. So.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. We're gonna hopefully be streaming live with you all every weekend for Sandbox Sunday with a lot more guests coming up. So please check us out. Stay safe, everyone. Thanks a lot.
See you, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.